census?
The census is a special time when we count every single person in the country.
Do kids and babies count too?
Of course, counting everyone in your home helps support your neighborhood by funding schools, hospitals, and more. So complete the census by calling, going online, or returning your form by mail. It's totally private.
Visit 2020census.gov and
Make your family count!
Brought to you by Carnegie Corporation of New York and the Ad Council.
The fight against racism is continuing to show in the world of sports. And our own Major League Baseball team, the Cleveland Indians, announced on Friday that the team will start talking about a possible name change following years of controversy. Our Lindsey Buckingham joins us live this morning from Progressive Field with the history of the team's name and the renewed effort for the change and what it means to Indigenous people in our area. Good morning, Lindsey.
Good morning to you, Romney. It's a name the team has held for 105 years. But now that there's a possible name change, we wanted to dig deep into the history and find out how we got there in the first place. Many longtime fans and sports historians believe the name was chosen to honor Louis Francis Sockalexis, a Cleveland professional baseball player, one of the first Native Americans in the game. He joined the then Cleveland Spiders, and that's believed that some fans started calling the team the Indians as a nod to his talent. Cleveland then went by the Blues in 1901, followed by a brief stint as the Broncos. Then Napoleon Lajoie joined the Broncos, and fans voted overwhelmingly to call the team the Naps. When Lajoie left, they went back to the Spiders era. When Sockalexis led the team, that's when sports historians say the team changed to the Indians. Since then, Native Americans and other activists have gathered on opening day to chant, change the name, change the logo, for over 20 years, hoping for their own change.
Welcome to Good Seats Still Available, a curious little podcast devoted to exploring what used to be in professional sports. Here's your host, Tim Hanlon.
Hey everybody, what is the news? How you doing? My name is Tim Hanlon, and this is Good Seats Still Available, our curious little podcast excursion each and every week into what used to be in professional sports. We thank you for finding us. And welcome, of course, to the proceedings. That clip sets the tone. Well, in some way, shape, or form, it does. Unwittingly, that clip from WKYC Channel 3 in Cleveland, Lindsey Buckingham reporting. No, not the Fleetwood Mac former member. As we kind of get into a little bit of an intrigue here with this story this week. Eric Nusbaum is our guest this week. He is the return guest from our episode number 158, where we talked about the not so glorious history of Dodger Stadium. I highly encourage you to listen to that, and of course get the book dedicated to that story called Stealing Home, Los Angeles, the Dodgers, and the Lives Caught in Between. It's a fascinating story, and Eric Nusbaum is a fascinating guest for a lot of different reasons. One of which is his commitment to writing stories about various forms of sports history, and in particular from his website, his subscribable blog called Sports Stories, sportsstories.substack.com. Highly encourage you to sign up for that and get the weekly email letter from him. And we delved into a whole treasure trove of some of those stories. And this week, we wanted to kind of circle around one that he wrote about 2 years ago around the story of the Cleveland Spiders. Now, the Cleveland Spiders, as many baseball fans may know, especially in 1899, were known as, and still are, the worst team for putting in the worst season in Major League Baseball history. The 1899 Cleveland Spiders showed up with a record in the National League back in the day of 20 wins and 134 losses, a record that still stands. I think it was a 180 winning percentage, if you want to even call it that. The Spiders were a team in the National League, the earliest, almost the earliest days of the National League, basically running, let's see, they were around from 1889 to 1899, a good 10 years. The last year of their existence is when they rolled that sort of horrible record. They were preceded by 2 years in the American Association, 1887, 1888, so 2 seasons there. But we're going to get into the story of their very last year of existence, the Spiders, in 1899, and the reasons behind it. It's a fascinating story. It's been told elsewhere, but we kind of sort of get into the nitty-gritty of it. But basically, it's a story that includes another team, the St. Louis Perfectos, who you people in St. Louis will, of course, know were the actual direct lineage and source of what are now known as the St. Louis Cardinals. That's one aspect of the story. Another aspect of the story, of course, is their horrid record and how it lasts even into today's modern age. Nobody has come close, although there have been a few. The Mets of 62, for example, were pretty bad. There are a bunch of other teams that sort of approached it, but certainly nothing to the extent of the terrible record posted by the Cleveland Spiders. And we get into all that story, but it's also interestingly and somewhat unwittingly wrapped up into the current travails that the Cleveland, now called Indians in the American League, have been around forever in Cleveland, now find themselves in today's sort of modern sensibilities and the imperfection of that name and its treatment, if you will, of the Native American among our citizenry, and something that we actually talked about in similar straits when we talked about the Washington NFL football franchise and their name issues, and probably other teams, as we sort of alluded to as well. But the reason why it's important for this story this week, yes, baseball historians will recognize that the American League Cleveland Indians have no direct relationship to the National League team known as the Spiders that died after the 1899 season. However, as you heard in that setup, Louis Sockalexis, one of the star standout and Native American, by the way, by many accounts recognized as the first ever Native American player in National League and actually Major League Baseball history, was a key player on that Spiders team. I believe both in the woeful year of 1899, if I'm not mistaken, but certainly in the years prior to that. Apparently, the reason why the team that came in the American League a few years after that was named its current name, the Indians. And actually, the nickname Indians was applied to the Spiders informally in deference to Sockalexis. So it's an intriguing story with multiple layers that half of which we didn't even expect when we just reached out to say, hey, Eric, would you like to be back on the show to talk about one of your great stories from Sports Stories? Again, that's sportsstories.substack.com for you if you guys want to subscribe to it. As we just innocently sort of asked about this little asterisk, I think, in baseball history, the woeful 18, it's hard to say, the woeful 1899 season of the Cleveland Spiders, which is our topic this week here on The Big Show. And it's a fascinating story, lots of intrigue, lots of tangents, and we get into it in just a few moments with Eric. Please stick around. Sponsorship this week is brought to you by oldschoolshirts.com, where, of course, you can regale in all things Cleveland sports and all kinds of other sports, lots of other teams, lots of other cities, lots of other regions. But, of course, we want to highlight Cleveland this week, of course, because that's where our show is domiciled, and lots of great shirts and stuff, including, by the way, a shirt that is just beautiful and probably one of a kind, devoted to League Park in Cleveland. Yes, still standing and sort of in commemorative form now. It's no longer obviously operational, although it is for rec league play, but it is there in sort of memorial / museum-like status, and a great nod to the history of baseball, not only in the country, but in Cleveland specifically. A great Cleveland League Park shirt. It's red with the beautiful outline of League Park, and that's, of course, where the Spiders and the Blues and a bunch of other iterations of Cleveland baseball existed, even the Indians themselves for a long time. And it is one of the very many shirts that you will find from our friends at oldschoolshirts.com. Of course, we've got a promo code for not only for that shirt, but just about any other shirt you find there at oldschoolshirts.com. That promo code is Good Seats. Good Seats is the promo code. 10% off all of your purchases from our pals at oldschoolshirts.com. Get the League Park shirt. Get, I don't know, how about the Cleveland Crunch shirt? How about the old Coliseum shirt? Maybe you like to remember the Miracle at Richfield, the old Richfield Coliseum from 1976. How about the Big 30, the Big 3-0 CKLW in commemorative T-shirt form? All kinds of Cleveland memories, as well as many other cities and many other regions and many other sports and leagues, etc. Pop culture, you name it. Oldschoolshirts.com. That promo code Good Seats. Thank you to P.F. Wilson and his friends there, and a tip of the hat to him and all the great folks in Cleveland. Now, PF is not in Cleveland, he's in Cincinnati, but regardless, wherever you are in the great state of Ohio, for God's sakes, how about some celebratory T-shirts to be purchased? And let's also celebrate the woeful existence, well, at least the last season of which, of the Cleveland Spiders. Now, they were a pretty darn good team prior to 1899, but let's find out why they all of a sudden went from pretty darn competitive. Cy Young, for example, a stalwart on this team, mind you, and why in 1899 everything went to hell in a handbasket and then to the end of the franchise's existence. Let's get into it with our pal Eric Nusbaum as we talk about Spiders baseball in Cleveland. Please enjoy. For our audience, right, not only were you a great guest in a previous episode about stealing home, the story about Dodger Stadium and its, frankly, ugly history into coming into being, right? I think everybody, celebrates it and thinks it's part of the sort of the hagiography of the Dodger lore. And if you haven't listened to that episode, I encourage you to perhaps pause this one first and make sure you download and ingest that one, because it's a fascinating topic. It's a great conversation, and Eric was kind enough to put up with our incessant questions about it. But to regale our audience a bit about who you are, your background, and maybe sort of your sort of other outlet when you're not writing great books and important books. I guess your the manner in which you express some great sports history in quote unquote sports stories, your site.
Yes. So Stealing Home was the book, and it came out in March. And I would say, please do listen to that podcast first. But so before the book came out, but after I had finished writing it, my friend Adam Billison and I, and he's an illustrator, decided we wanted to kind of try our hands at a new publication. And that became Sports Stories, which is a weekly-ish free newsletter where I write about sports history and Adam does illustrations. So it's a sort of cool illustrated look at kind of the same stories you might hear on this podcast, unexpected sports history stories. And
what's the why? Like, is it an outlet for you personally? I mean, you're using Substack, which is arguably a move forward, I guess, in terms of hopefully for writers, authors, journalists, et cetera, to frankly monetize better their writings. But it's also a good outlet too, I guess, for maybe stories that have been sort of, I don't know, just in your id somewhere.
We chose Substack because we thought it'd be fun. I've had a blog before. I wrote a book. I've written for magazines. Never done a newsletter, and it's just a way to reach people directly, to kind of cut out the middleman. I had been working at Vice as an editor for years before I wrote the book, and when the book, I knew it was coming out, and I knew I kind of needed to get back to writing publicly, partly as a way to like reintroduce myself to the world before the book came out, because I had spent a couple of years working on it and not publishing anything. So I thought a newsletter might be a fun way to do that, a simple and clean way to do it. I was not really ready to go out and pitch magazine stories. I didn't have the time, to be honest. But with a newsletter, I thought, hey, I can write some stuff that I think is compelling, tell some stories that I think are interesting, and start to kind of see what happens. There wasn't a lot of pressure, and it turned out to be great. We've been going for almost a year now, and our audience is growing, and it's a kind of fun little community we have.
Well, and readers should know and remember from our previous episode, that's sportsstories.substack.com, and you too can subscribe. And Lord knows that there are probably at least a half dozen stories that we could have gone deep on. And we reserve the right to call you back, especially if this one goes well, to kind of get into some of them, because they do creep into and or overlay with our silly little focus, which is teams and leagues and things, all things. We get now into events and stuff. We've done the Tour de Trump recently, for example. We probably want to do the superstars at some point soon. We have an excuse possibly to do that, et cetera, around stuff that's no longer around in sort of pro and pro-related sports and stuff. And then one that kind of stuck out to me, or maybe struck out is maybe more appropriate as we get into the topic.
I was going to say.
Thank you. Is this story that I think is actually, by the time we drop this episode, is rounding its 121st anniversary, because I think October 1st is the actual date and the excuse for the original story back in 2019 when you wrote it. About this team, well, it's actually teams, right? It's this Cleveland Spiders, I guess, is sort of the obvious sort of part of the story, but it's obviously related to at least one other team way back when, in the earlier days of the National League. Maybe a little background as to why this story and who we're kind of sort of circling around. The Cleveland Spiders, notable for not the most happy of reasons.
The Cleveland Spiders are the worst team in baseball history. They were awful. In the 1899 season, they went 20-134. They lost 40 of 41 in a stretch.
But it wasn't because but this is also a team, though, that existed, prior to that poor season, right? So this is around the time of the National League, kind of, I want to say in its infancy, but it's certainly its earliest years. This is a team that was around in 1889 and lasted for a good 10 years or so, and then had a cup of coffee prior to that in the fledgling, depending on who you seek historically, not quite Major League or maybe Major League, American Association. So this is not a team that kind of showed up out of nowhere to have the stinking record that lasts for all time.
No, the horrible record of the Cleveland Spiders was not really an accident. It was definitely not the players' fault. They were a team that was quite literally built to fail. They were a historical anomaly in a sense, but also they were sort of the end result of a system in baseball that existed at the time that was just deeply broken and corrupt. So you can't really blame the players for only winning 20 games, but the kind of ignominy of the record sticks with them now 121 years later for sure.
Well, let's go to 1899, because this is actually the last season of the Spiders' existence as well, right? And it, my sense is that this had a hefty dollop of encouragement to perhaps make it their last season. But maybe you can set the scene as to who this team was and maybe why they sort of got into this situation, because there's another team in the mix of all of this.
Yes, absolutely. So we should start with Frank DeHaas Robinson. Frank was a cable car magnate who was from the Cleveland area and became very, very rich. He had a big mustache. He had a big personality. He was sort of a kind of classic 19th century businessman, baseball owner, booster. And Frank bought the Cleveland team in 1887. They became known as the Spiders supposedly because they were full of tall, lanky guys, and they resembled spiders physically. You can see how much thought was put into baseball nicknames in the 19th century. The Spiders were a National League team. It's worth saying because the Cleveland baseball team now is in the American League, and they were Frank's thing. He was a pretty good owner for the most part in the beginning. They had a decent team. They never were great. They were known for being a pain in the ass to everybody who played them. They played dirty. They fought. But there was one serious problem with baseball in Cleveland and in Ohio at the time. And it was basically Sunday baseball. The Spiders were not allowed to play on Sundays. They were legally blocked from doing so in Ohio. And this became a huge problem for Robinson because Sunday was the only day that everybody had off. This was before the 5-day work week had taken effect, before the labor movement really. And without Sunday games, Robinson didn't feel like he could fill up his seats in a stadium. So,
and what was the reason for it? Was it kind of a blue law thing? Was it a sort of a godly day that the Lord has taken rest? Is it sort of vestiges of that?
So in theory, yes. In theory, it was a godly day, right? It was Sabbath. You shouldn't play baseball on the Sabbath, but bars were open in Ohio on Sundays also.
Oh, perfect.
So you have this
the
thing
almighty
where
God
you have
of alcohol, of course.
It's the classic, like the enemy of my enemy is my friend, where you have Frank DeHaas Robinson and the Cleveland Spiders in the middle, and then on either side you have churches saying no Sunday baseball, and you have bars not wanting the competition saying no Sunday baseball. So the unholy alliance of the alcohol industry and the religion industry, I guess you'd call it, working together to keep baseball closed on Sundays. And it got to the point where Robinson actually held a couple of protest games on Sundays, and all the players and umpires were arrested and taken off the field by the cops. So it was just not working in Cleveland for him. As that's all happening, we should take a look at the other team in this equation, and that team is called the St. Louis Perfectos. They are another National League team. They have another sort of charismatic, kind of crazy owner, a guy named Chris von der Ahe. It's like a German name. A-H-E is how you spell it. So he was sort of a self-aggrandizer and, huckster to a certain extent. He kind of wanted to make baseball, big entertainment, put the stadium in a theme park, that kind of stuff.
Which, by the way, it seems to square with a lot of sort of the personalities, by the way, the players themselves too, right? We're talking the earliest years of the professional game in baseball. I mean, 1876 and onward, right? But still, they were roguish is a kind and gentle term for some of these characters, but characters maybe is actually the better word. And that seemed to be not just a player thing, but an ownership thing too.
Yes, absolutely. It's totally an ownership thing. Baseball was sort of a vaudevillian deal. I mean, it was entertainment, like it still is, but it looked different then. The sport was different as it was played, and also as it was experienced by fans and as it was promoted. It was much more of a Wild Wild West sort of attitude. And in St. Louis, that Wild Wild West attitude ended up sort of costing this owner, Chris von der Ahe, his team. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right, to be honest. I didn't actually hear it when I was writing the story.
Well, the good news is he's not around to challenge it. So let's just
That's true.
You probably
That's
know
true.
more about it than anybody. So
the short version of this is that the Perfectos are a fine team, but their owner's going broke. The stadium burned down. He needs to sell the team in a hurry. And Frank Robinson gets wind of this. And he does something that you could do at the time, but you can't do now. He buys the Perfectos. So now Frank Robinson owns the Cleveland Spiders and the St. Louis Perfectos. What a good position to be in for an owner. And obviously the first thing he does is he says, screw you to Cleveland, and he trades, quote unquote, all the best players on the Spiders team to St. Louis for all their worst players, in effect, creating a super team in St. Louis and creating the opposite of a super team in Cleveland. He then transferred ownership of the Cleveland team, the Spiders, to his brother, and basically just said, I'm done with you, Cleveland. The Spiders are going to be terrible, and the Perfectos are going to be great.
So, okay, so let's unpack that a little bit. So the Robinson, excuse me. Say it, Robinson.
Robinson. I've been saying his name wrong. It's Robinson. It's Frank
okay.
Robinson, not Robinson.
Okay, good. Well, they're not around either, so whatever we want to call them. But the Robinson, but they felt that St. Louis, and these the renamed Browns, by the way. The first ever incarnation of the St. Louis Browns was renamed the the Perfectos, which I think is a far better name, by the way, and you wonder why it doesn't exist today, but I digress.
Well, we'll find out what their name became.
Okay, good. Well, there you go. So hint, hint, wink, wink. So why St. Louis as a perceived better market? I'm guessing they felt that a good team in St. Louis would be a better attraction, maybe in a better business proposition than anything similar in Cleveland. Why is that?
I don't think it was really about the city. I think it was about the political circumstances in the city. I think.
Got it.
In St. Louis, Robeson, I'm going to just be hard on myself about that mispronunciation for the last 15 minutes. He had a chance to build a successful business he wanted to build there and to have a successful team. And he felt that the powers that be in Cleveland, be they, godly powers or, the powers of the booze business, didn't want him to be all he could be. So his way of solving that problem was to just take his ball and leave town.
Now, this was a pretty darn good team Cleveland was in the season prior in 1898, right? So there were some real star players, right? So this was not these shenanigans were a pretty serious deal in terms of altering the quality and the balance of play in the National League.
Yeah, the Spiders were a legit team. They were not bad at all. They were, if anything, they were pretty good year in and year out. And they had some star players and they had a loyal fan base. But, everything in sports is temporary. And the reign of the Cleveland Spiders as, a respectable franchise proved to be extremely temporary.
Well, so it's interesting. I mean, there's some Hall of Famers here, right? Cy Young being among them. That's now going to be domiciled in St. Louis, going from Cleveland. Jesse Burkett and Bobby Wallace. These are all, even their manager, Patsy Thibault. These are all Hall of Fame types that, now are domiciled in St. Louis. So how does this sort of play out? Because who does Cleveland get in return?
Nobody meaningful. They get in return. They literally got the Perfecto's old uniforms from the previous year. They got, it's sort of, if you think of like a sports movie where like the underdog team has, all the worst equipment and all the worst everything. That's sort of what the Spiders became. The uniforms that they got back from St. Louis, literally you could see the imprint of the lettering that said St. Louis on it, and they were forced to wear them in Cleveland. It was very undignified for them. The Perfectos got to go to spring training in Hot Springs, Arkansas. The Spiders trained in like a local gym in Cleveland at a high school. It was just, champagne versus spoiled milk. It was not a pretty scene in Cleveland.
So I'm curious as to sort of how they went to market, I wonder. I mean, clearly sports writers, I'm sure, were onto the, I mean, was it obfuscated? Was it hidden? Was there sleight of hand here? Were they try to dupe the fans and the press around sort of what was happening, or was it sort of all sort of out there, sort of hanging out in plain air?
It was out there in plain air. I mean, after the first game, sports writers in Cleveland started calling them the Misfits, and then they would come up with these increasingly depressing nicknames for the team: the Forsakens, the Exiles, the Wanderers. They were called the Wanderers because they were so bad that they stopped playing home games partway through the year because nobody wanted to watch them in Cleveland. They really just kind of limped into nothingness.
How does the National League and the oversight of the league, how do they sort of handle all this, right? Because obviously the conflict of interest it's in modern terms, obviously it's pretty plain to see, but obviously this forces the issue for years down the road and maybe some of the rules and all that kind of stuff. But I'm finding it hard to believe or understand why organized baseball at the time, it seemingly had no recourse. Were you able to sort of determine as to like how this situation was even allowed kind of to happen, to have two owners at the same time?
Organized baseball was not that organized, right, in the 19th century. Even going into the 20th century, it's become a process of slow consolidation of power, right, amongst what we now call Major League Baseball. But in the beginning, there was there were competitive leagues, right? The National League, the American Association, the American League came in, then the Federal League tried to compete. There was the PCL, Pacific Coast League, in this time was arguably competitive with the other leagues. The whole world of baseball was just so different. It was a different landscape. And to be fair to the National League, after this season, the same thing, by the way, was happening simultaneously in the National League with the Brooklyn Superbas and the Baltimore Orioles. The Superbas ended up winning the National League after pretty much just taking all the good players away from the Orioles, an earlier version of the Orioles. That after that year, this practice, which was called syndicate ownership, became outlawed. So to be fair, Frank Robeson and the owners of the Superbas and Orioles did kind of get a slap on the wrist, and this practice was banned.
I thought it was interesting. There was doing some research. I saw that the Cleveland Plain Dealer. So first of all, the first game that they played was against the Perfectos, the Spiders, huh? And I thought it was interesting because April 16th, 1899, the Plain Dealer, the writer said, I think the quote was, or the headline was, "The farce has begun." So it's obviously pretty clear that this was not going to go well, and they seem to live up to that promise. I mean, was there any fighting spirit in this team? Was there any potential ray of hope, or was everybody in the tank and or it was just? I mean, I'm just wondering if players on that roster, the management, the manager, fans, anybody, or was it just kind of, a lost cause from the very beginning? Because you'd think that maybe, some of the better story, of course, would be that these young know-nothings or these traded afterthoughts, kind of bonded as a team and kind of got going and kind of made stuff happen. But clearly that wasn't the case. I just wonder how desperate and lost a cause it was and how early in the season.
I think it was immediately lost, to be honest. I don't think there really ever was a sense of hope. A lot of the trades that happened, a lot of the sort of activity is also worth pointing out. I don't think I said this in the article. It happened right before the season. So Robeson traded, Patsy Tebow and Cy Young and all these guys to St. Louis almost immediately before the season started, I think in late March. And so it wasn't like Cleveland had a lot of time to recover after losing all their best players. They were just sort of emptied out, and that was that.
Yeah, it's interesting because it looks like Robeson, even publicly went to lengths to basically say that he's going to basically run this thing as a sideshow. So you wonder. I mean, that seems a little odd, right? Because at least you would want to kind of at least go through the motions and try to at least put together some semblance of a team. I mean, spite obviously is certainly playing a large role in all of this, right? But you could also hold your nose and sort of throw out a team there. I mean, but when you publicly go out there and maybe not even debate the press's perception of this literally and figuratively sideshow, you're already dooming yourself to a loss. I mean, you're going to lose more money than you would have lost even if you were trying to make a go out of it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe he thought, I'm not going to invest any money into this, and I'll just, consider this part of the cost of the Perfectos. I get to own a better team, and I paid very little for that team, so it's okay if I lose a little bit, in Cleveland. I'm not sure exactly what his thinking was. At the very least, he was able to, create a really good franchise in St. Louis and really plant the seeds for what would become one of the greatest franchises in sports history with this, very, very sketchy turn of events. So the Perfectos wore, beautiful white and red uniforms, and that tone of red on the uniform sort of stuck in the imagination of some sports writers. They started calling them St. Louis Cardinals. And there you have the beginning of the St. Louis Cardinals organization, sort of born in this original sin of syndicate ownership and sketchy deal making.
Well, that's an interesting sort of track of history. How long did it take from this season? How well did they do actually by comparison to their brethren in Cleveland. I mean, they didn't sort of run away winning at all, of course.
No, they were actually good, but not great. They won more games than they lost, but they were not anywhere close to the Superbas. I think they were a solidly winning team, but not a championship team.
So far from perfecto on the field. When did that sort of transition happen and the Cardinals' name stick for good?
I think it happened pretty soon afterwards. I think it became the Cardinals in like 1902 or 1903. I don't think they were the perfectos for long after the trade. So
in some respects, this is actually almost a it's a brilliant move, but it's certainly a happy move for the Robesons. At least that. So what becomes though of the Cleveland Spiders? Here's a team that was spent a good 10 years in the National League, had gotten was a major part of the American Association for a couple of years prior to that. But did this basically just drove, I'm guessing, this franchise into the ground? Was it basically a fait accompli even before this wacky escapade in 1899? Do you think it was just not long given the Sunday situation?
I think that's kind of what it was. The National League contracted after that season from 12 teams to 8, and the Spiders were one of the casualties. So it was very easy for the league to say you're out, and for the team to just kind of quietly disband and disappear into the night. The team that became the Cleveland Indians was around, I think, in some form or another. But I don't know if they were in Cleveland yet in 1899. I think they might have still been in Michigan where they started off.
Any player names or stories or managers or just figures in part of this, either in the transfer to St. Louis or folks that wound up coming to Cleveland? Any names or any particular stories kind of stick out from all of this? I mean, some really cool names. I mean, Nig Cuppy for one.
Yeah, I think
Cowboy Jones for another.
I think the most interesting player from the Cleveland Spiders history is Louis Sockalexis, and he was the first Native American player in baseball history, officially speaking, and at a time when obviously the sport was extremely segregated. For some reason, he was able to play, and he was extremely talented. He came from Maine, and he also was an extremely troubled guy. And when the team sort of made its move, the team by I mean the good players on the Cleveland Spiders, when they made their joint move to St. Louis, Louis Sockalexis didn't come along, in part because I think he had been drinking a lot and they just didn't feel like he had it anymore. But it's kind of compelling to think about what could have happened, had he had the long career that he might have had he not been battling alcoholism. That's interesting.
I also get the sense that that could have been a significant enhancement of perhaps a conduit of Native American players. I mean, we've talked about a few of those players in various past episodes, but obviously this is a time where, and it's ironic, of course, that the team that wound up coming into Cleveland afterwards was named the Indians, and obviously still a very, maybe less so then, but certainly now, a pretty sensitive name and topic, right, in today's sort of social society. Yeah, there's actually a, first of all, I think they should change the name. I should say that.
Sure. Second of all,
we had a conversation about the formerly known team in Washington, the NFL team, of course, and there are plenty of others too.
Yeah, and look, they're 1-0 now as the Washington football team. I think so. I think that the name Cleveland Indians actually came as a sort of backwards tribute to Louis Sockalexis. That his legacy is why the team became called the Indians.
Yeah, that's interesting, and people like Chief Myers and some others, right? I mean, I think that's a very interesting background. And look, and you think about it, we had this in this conversation about the Washington NFL franchise last week. If that indeed is or was true, right? I mean, that can be or could be a bit of the dialogue, frankly, that could either rehabilitate or justify or otherwise historically put into context in a more positive and celebratory light, perhaps the possible retaining of that nickname. But to be honest with you, until we've had this conversation, it doesn't seem to be very. Maybe I'm just missing it because I didn't grow up in Cleveland or I know more about the story. But it would seem to me that would be, if true, something to highlight and to underline as part of the beginnings of why this franchise exists today in its current name.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see them try to make that case, without coming off as completely disingenuous. I think that the fact that Chief Wahoo has existed up until just this year, sort of, you lose a lot of credibility when it comes to saying that you want to honor the tradition of, Native American athletes like Sock Alexis. I just don't get the sense that that is what the organization has been looking to do, or that the fans in Cleveland who have supported Chief Wahoo, and don't want to change the name, really care about.
Is there any redeeming quality or factor that you can sort of mine from this Spiders season? I mean, they are statistically, or at least on average, denoted as the worst in Major League Baseball history. I mean, a 20-134 record that nets out to what, a 130 quote unquote winning percentage. The Mets of 62 were at a 250, right? They only won 40 games and lost 120, right? So they lost, that was nominally better. And the Detroit Tigers, more recently in 2003, had a 265 futility record. But the Spiders seem to, I don't know, is this something besides that? Is there anything positive to come out of all this, or are they just destined to be sort of the benchmark by which all teams will be measured against in terms of futility?
I mean, they're definitely going to be that benchmark in baseball, but I think there's some things we can take away. First of all, I would say that we saw a sport capable of reform, right? After the season, rules were changed, syndicate ownership is banned. That's a good thing. Second of all, Cleveland Spiders is a really cool name for a team, and we should consider bringing it back for the current Cleveland baseball team. Third of all,
along with, by the way, the Perfectos and the Superbas, because I think those are all great names that just should be just rehabilitated in some way.
Absolutely, I'm with you. I forgot what my third of all was.
Oh, see, great.
Oh, so here's the third of all. We still have teams in baseball that tank and try to lose. It happens for different reasons. We don't have syndicate ownership, but I think we should continue to hold owners and general managers accountable when they do what Frank Robeson did and lose games on purpose. I think it's unfair to fans and unfair to players.
Oh, no doubt. But it's big business, right? And even in 1899 terms, it was business, right? So one can see, especially if the rules allowed it, the idea of effectively this version of tanking, right, is you could argue with cynicism, but it's a savvy business move given the rules.
Yeah, I mean, it's a savvy business move, but I would say it's an amoral business move, or possibly an immoral business move.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. But that has not stopped many an owner in professional sports, as we have learned over the years, from attempting things such as that. All right, one sort of other another question. In my research, it almost seems, I don't know if this is a convenient sort of framing or not, but it almost looks like unwittingly this exercise in 1899 was the beginning, almost of the end, of the National League's exclusive oversight of professional big league baseball. It was almost like the beginning of perhaps creating the beginnings of the American League, ending the monopoly that the National League had.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was sort of the beginning. I mean, I think seeing that the league downsized, there's definitely, it's very clear with 1899 that things were ready to change in baseball and that there was an opening. I can't speak too much to the development of the American League because I'm not an expert in it, but I will say that certainly with the National League, you have a lot changing, a lot in flux.
Where do you see the Spiders' history living? Does anybody? I mean, nobody. Well, look, this is a team that did exist prior. They won a Temple Cup back in 1895, which was quite the thing. I mean, does anybody claim ownership to this team history, or is it basically just a forgotten footnote and nobody wants it? Thank you very much.
I don't think there's an official holder of the Spiders' name or history in the way that happens with some former franchises. I'm not sure. I think that you'd find a lot of nerdy baseball fans like me, holding onto the history. There was a book about Patsy Tebow, who was the manager. There's, Society of American Baseball Research have done a ton of great work on the Cleveland Spiders and on baseball of that era. But I'm not sure if there's one official owner. There's no Frank Robeson of the current Cleveland Spiders legacy.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess, too, one could probably look at the Cleveland Indians franchise, given how long they have lasted in the American leagues ever since. But again, this is a team that had to its on its roster prior to the great bait and switch, right? I mean, people like Cy Young, right? Probably one of the most indelible names in all of the Baseball Hall of Fame, right? Part of this team for a while was actually, I think it was his first professional team. So this is all part of the great tableau and the stories. Look, I think we're also in an era too where we can kind of also look back and perhaps maybe absorb some of this and remember some of this stuff. And it wouldn't kill anybody to have a Spiders uniform once occasionally and sort of dial back the machinery and maybe celebrate some of the long and torturous history of this sport. Maybe, frankly, the St. Louis perfectos as well. I wonder, and I don't know, and I'm sorry I'm not a Cardinals fan. I do live in Chicago now, so I do have a rule against it in my house to even consider that idea about being the Cardinals. But I wonder how the perfectos legacy and the situation there is or is not rooted in the Cardinals' history. If there's ever been sort of any sort of acknowledgement and or more than that.
I don't know. I mean, one interesting thing about that is that soon after 1889, Frank Robeson passed away. His brother Stanley took over the team, then he passed away. And then Frank's daughter, Helene, became the owner, and she became the first woman to own a major league franchise all the way back in the early 1900s in St. Louis with the Cardinals, which is a cool piece of history that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the horrible Cleveland Spiders.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I also, too, sort of as one sort of last part of all this, too, obviously the Spiders, tanking on purpose, right, also scared away a lot of teams from actually making it to Cleveland or having games being played in Cleveland because of just the absolute hard nature, not only of the play, but of the woeful attendance, too. Again, it goes back to they were also kind of sort of vagabond in that they had to kind of go on the road and sort of play out the strings, so to speak, because if people remember back in the day, a lot of the revenues were dependent on the gates, and you can imagine that a lot of teams didn't want to sort of make the trek or make the commitment to play in Cleveland if they knew that there was nobody going to be showing up at the game. It would actually have been a loss leader for them to do so. Yeah,
eventually Spiders just play all their games on the road. They didn't even bother anymore.
See, all the more interesting stuff with relation to this team. So I guess now it's up to both of us to find the Cleveland Spiders or maybe even the St. Louis Perfectos flannel jersey from Ebbets Field Flannels or some other place, because this is just as a very interesting asterisk and footnote for sure. What other stories do you think you have in the hopper for your sports stories site, either in baseball or otherwise? Do you think are sort of scratching at you to get out there into the world?
Well, so this week, I'll give you the sneak preview. I'm working on a story about, and I don't know when this will air. This could already be published by the time this episode airs, but I'm writing about an athlete named Norm Bass. And Norm Bass was one of the first ever two-sport stars in baseball and football in the 60s, and his career was wrecked by arthritis, believe it or not, in his 20s. He was a pitcher. He was throwing 100-mile-an-hour fastballs. He was a talented athlete, and he had to give up his career because of arthritis, only to decades later make it back as a Paralympic table tennis player and win a medal in, I believe, Sydney in 2000. So that's the next story for me.
All right, our thanks to Eric, and let's tell you where you can find all kinds of stuff from him. Of course, the website from which we picked this story, which is called Spiders and Perfectos, is at Eric's awesome site, and the one that you can subscribe to for free. It's called Sports Stories, and it's found at sportsstories.substack.com. Again, that's sportsstories.substack.com. You can, again, subscribe for free and enjoy all these great history stories in and around sports, both past, mostly past, a little bit of present as well. And of course, we also want to recommend to you highly the book that we featured on our previous episode with Eric, episode number 158, devoted to the story of Dodger Stadium. The book is called Stealing Home, and it's the story of the not so pretty history of the development of that stadium and the legacy that it leaves behind and haunts, frankly, still to this day. Highly recommended read and an excellent work at that. Now, let's see. On our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com, not only will you find that old episode, but you can also find, for example, all of our old episodes, but maybe, for example, episode 110 with our pal Ken Krasalovic, where we talk about Cleveland's League Park, right, where the Spiders played, the Indians played in some of their earlier years, etc. Very a legacy ballpark, commemorated today, still standing and revered in baseball circles as well as in Cleveland sports history, of course. There's a museum there, there's a gift store and all that kind of stuff. You can even play, I think, rec league baseball still in the shadows or in the outline of the original park. It's terrific, and it's a great conversation that we had with Ken back almost a year plus ago. And like I said, all of our old episodes, all 180 plus of them, can be found, streamed, downloaded, whatever, at goodseatsstillavailable.com. The easiest way, of course, to get all the episodes is just to simply subscribe to us wherever you get podcasts, wherever you know, that could be Spotify, it could be Apple, it could be Google. I don't care where you get them. Just subscribe, maybe even rate and review us, for God's sakes. Give us a little 5-star rating. We'd appreciate that. Let's see. You can follow us on social media, too, of course. On Twitter, you'll find us at Good Seats Still. On Instagram, we're at Good Seats Still Available. There's a little Facebook page devoted to us as well. Just follow us there. If you want to send us some email, you can do that, too. How about at hello@goodseatsstillavailable.com. That's pretty easy to do. And, of course, when you're on the website, you can also subscribe to our little email newsletter, which we send out every Sunday or so. No direct link to that, but you just scurry around the site there. You'll find it, and just give us your email and your name, and away you and we will go in the weeks to come. Our thanks, of course, to Jerry Payne, Audio Excellence, for his editing skills this week. We appreciate it, of course. And we thank you, of course, for listening thus far. And why not? How about a little fun little ditty to take us out? Let's do it. Okay, let's go back. Let's go way back. This song is the perhaps one of the earliest known recordings of the now very well-known song. It's Harry McDonough and the Hayden Quartet. And of course, it is Take Me Out to the Ball Game. This was recorded, we think, roughly around 1907, 1908 or so, about 10 years after our little story with the Spiders. But it sets the tone and hopefully puts a little smile on your heart as we send you on your way. Okay, let's take us out to the ball game. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Casey was baseball mad, had the fever and had it bad, just to root for for the hometown crew, every two, Katie Blue. On a Saturday, her young beau called to see if she'd like to go to see a show, but Miss Kate said no. I'll tell you what you can do. Takes me out to the ball game, takes me out with the crowd. Oh, buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I never get back. Let me root for the home team. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. Takes me out to the ball game. Takes me out with the crowd. Oh, buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I never get back. Let me root for the whole team. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. Casey saw all the games, knew the players by their first name, told the umpire he was wrong all along, good and strong. When the score was just 2-2, Casey knew what to do, so just to cheer up the boys she knew, she made the gang sing this song. Takes me out to the ball game, takes me out with the crowd. Oh, buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I never get back. Let me root for the whole team. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old.